Hello and welcome to day 9 / part 9 of 28 Days to Better Chess Tactics. Today we're going to go through perpetual check. Now perpetual check is an important tactic to know because you'll find yourself using it once in a while when, say, you blundered and you've lost material, so you have to find some saving grace. And normally it'll only happen by a mistake of your opponent, but sometimes when your opponent is looking for an attack and he's so focused on a mating attack, he'll miss opportunities where you can get his king in a perpetual. And so starting with this position, it's white to move, and you can see that black has an extra bishop and a pawn, and there's no way for white to prevent checkmate. Black's going to check either here or here with his queen. And so even if white tries to prevent it by bringing his queen here to b6, black would just simply checkmate on a1. So the only other option is to force a draw with a perpetual check. And so if he can force a perpetual of 3 times repetition, then at least he won't lose. And white does that by starting to check here, or he could start here. And now the black king just has to simply move back and forth. And now this is kind of an important pattern to know because it happens quite often for perpetuals with the king in the corner and the queen checking along this diagonal, or the dark square diagonal if it was on this side of the board. Alright, so we'll move on to position 1. We're going to go through 3 positions just to give you some practice spotting and using perpetuals, and also to notice when you're lost. In this position, position 1, it is white to move, and you can pause the video now. Alright, so you'll notice in this position, it's very similar to the initial example position, where we have the queen going along this diagonal with the king and with the pawn in front. And you'll also notice that white is pretty much a rook down, with black having some pretty sinister threats of checkmate, or just even the position changing just a little bit to where white won't have the opportunity of a perpetual. Alright, so since it's white to move, we can see that white has a check with here or his queen. Of course he wouldn't do it with his queen, but since we can force the check at this point, even though he's a rook down, he has a perpetual simply because both of black's pieces, the queen and the rook, are over on the queen side, and there's no interposition, otherwise he would be lost. And so white has this perpetual here, and he'll just keep doing that until a 3-fold repetition or just a agreement of a draw. But you'll notice that in this position, this initial position, white has to first notice a check, but more importantly, he has to recognize when he's lost. And that's one of the most important things to realize when you need to force a repetition or a perpetual check, is when you're lost. And sometimes that's a difficult thing to do. In these positions, it's more simple, but when it's more complicated and your opponent is attacking you, sometimes you're just trying to find ways not to lose, so you'll be more acutely aware of when you can force a perpetual or repetition. Alright, moving on to position 2. In position 2, it is white to move, and you can pause the video now. Just keep in mind that you're looking for a perpetual check to get a draw. Alright, so in this position, I've chosen another common kind of perpetual check motif. You'll notice again that the white king is 1 move away from mate, versus a queen and a knight versus 2 minor pieces. And so white's in pretty desperate position to force a perpetual check or repetition. So here, with the bishop and the knight, he's able to have a perpetual check And you'll see this motif every once in a while in your own games, or the opportunity for it, because it's quite common and it's sometimes easily missed in a game. So pretty much the only check here is with the knight, and because the bishop cuts off this square and the knight controls both of these squares when he's checking, the king is forced to just go back and forth. Now, of course, these kinds of positions are easily prevented by the opponent if they notice them, but again, because black was probably so concentrated on checkmating, he forgot that this formation can lead to a perpetual. Alright, moving on to the last position, position 3. In position 3, it is white to move, and you can pause the video now. Alright, so in this position, with white to move, it first looks like you might be able to have a checkmate. But unfortunately, the knight is protecting this square, so it won't be checkmate. But you need to be able to evaluate that you are totally lost, because not only are you a knight down, but black's going to have this pawn promotion possibly, as well as threatening mate here. So there's just no way for white to realistically prevent a mate other than forcing a perpetual. So the two checks that you need to evaluate are here, queen to c7, and queen takes b7. Now at first glance, it looks like you would just check here and then figure out what to do next, but you need to evaluate that after the king moves, the perpetual check is no longer there. Whereas if you take on b7, after the knight takes, you have this rook formation. The rook's on the 7th rank. And because none of black's pieces are protecting these squares or have the ability to, white is allowed a perpetual check, and he'll just move his rooks back and forth. And there's also a possibility that your opponent will err. For example, if the king moves here, then we actually have checkmate. So again, recognizing a perpetual is first recognizing that you're lost and that you have no way to prevent your opponent from checkmating or to win back material. Thanks for watching, everybody. This has been Day 9 Perpetual Check. So let me know what you think about this lesson. Leave a comment if you have any questions. We're trucking along with the 28 Days to Better Chess Tactics. I think there's going to be a few more basic tactical motifs, and then I'll probably do a video of checkmate patterns, and then we're going to go really deep into more complicated tactics, as well as deeper into the thought process, and then tactical games. Alright, so let me know what you think, and have a nice day.